Alright, this is for Aleksandra Ciesielska, or Ciesielska? I'm sorry if I murdered that. Okay, so the first thing that I would say right off the bat is that you have no real form in there. So I'm going to show you something real quick. If you just take a new layer and you fill it with color, it's going to turn everything to grayscale. And so you can see that the skin and the tree and some of the background kind of mixes all together. So you really have no like vibrancy. There's no separation between the elements. And so the first thing that I would say right off the bat is we want to come in here, and I'm going to just kind of separate the figure from the rest of the scene here. And I'm going to just do it really quickly here. Now, for the most part, the anatomy is good. You've got some feet to work on here and things like that, and put a little bit of perspective in the background. But what you're missing is the kind of reference on, I would say, the clothes. That's one of the first things that I would tell you to work on. With the clothes, you have just some issues going on here. Alright, so I'm going to take that and I'm going to subtract this real quick here. And we're just going to add this. Okay, so the first thing that I would say right off the bat is we're just going to copy that out, put that on a separate layer. And the first thing that you want to do, I think, is kind of define your background a little bit more. One, I'm going to just take this real quick and kind of elongate it. Let's grab a, there we go. I'll just elongate it so that the feet are kind of a little bit bigger and more defined. Same thing here. And you see, just by putting that a little bit more solid on the ground, that type of thing. The legs are really long, but other than that, it's okay. It's workable. But the problem is, like I said, everything in the background turns kind of gray. And so you want to give it a sense of kind of how things are going. So I'm going to just, the first thing I'm going to do before I do anything, I'm going to pick a light color, and I'm going to just pick a nice sky blue up here, and I'm going to define that sky blue like this. Now, if I have a sky blue light, so most of your tones are really warm, and so I'm going to create shadows, and this is my shadow color here. Okay? And so the first thing that I'm going to do is go in here, and with my shadow color, I'm going to just create a new layer, and I'm going to use a multiply. And I'm not worried about how dark everything is now, I'm just kind of getting the shadows in. And so I'm just starting to kind of build up the idea of form in your bushes and things like that. And something simple like this. And you can see by adding that in there, I'm already starting to get a little bit of sense of form and idea with everything that's going on. And then I'm going to define some of these trees in the background here. Just kind of, not quite there, it's creating a tangent, but something like this, something like that. And let's erase a little bit of this. And then we're going to add some shadows on her real quick here. And shadows underneath. And shadows where this light is kind of picking up here. So under here, a little bit under there, some under there. Let's erase this real quick. Where the hand is, so we're just going to kind of pick some of that. And so you see how basically I'm just taking real basic idea here. And I'm adding in these hard shadows here. Something like this. And by adding in these hard shadows, I'm giving it a sense of light. Now I can always go in and lower the shadow quality, control that a little bit more, and kind of go in and add in what I need to do. But by doing this, I'm adding a little bit more form. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to create a screen on here and say OK. And then on here, I'm just going to use some of this to kind of pull out some of this light that we created here. And by doing that, I've got now a sense of light that's coming in here, and I'm just roughing this in. So this is something that you have to sit down and render. And we're going to grab our shadow color here, add the darks in, maybe even so on and so forth. Oops. And something like that. So just by adding in these couple colors, even though they're very bright and they're very kind of a lot of information, I'm adding in much more depth. Now the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to go in the background and I'm going to add some of the sky color in. So I'm just going to kind of implement where some of the sky is starting to kind of leak through. Your scene here, because the woods, and we're just going to add a couple there, some here. The woods are not just one fell thing of information. It's a lot more than that. It's a, and I'm just going to build this big tree over here. I actually kind of going to build it in with this like so, and then I'm going to go grab this tree here. Oops. And we're going to grab this, and I'm just going to copy that. And with this tree in here, oops, yeah, so with this tree in here, I'm just going to grab this and select and transform it, and let's flip it horizontal. And so now with this in there, I've got a little bit more of, let's grab some of that darker shadow there, and I'm just kind of putting in there like this. And so now with that in there, what's happening is I'm getting much more of a sense of, kind of framing. I'm almost doing a symmetrical frame here, and I think I'm going to select and transform this a little bit to kind of pull into the character a little bit more. And so by pulling that into the character like that, what I'm doing now is I'm starting to think more about composition. And then on top of that, what I can do is, create a new layer here, and I'm going to just grab some of the darks, And the darks are going to, I'm just going to kind of something like this. And I'm just really roughing this in there. But what this is doing is this is pointing to the character. I mean, I'm giving a little bit more, and let's angle this. I'm giving it a little bit more information here. And it's starting to almost separate the foreground background elements. What I'm doing is I'm adding in a little bit more emphasis on kind of what's going on, as far as, like, I see a little bit more in the foreground now. I have, you know, this element here, and I can actually add in some of this bright, you know, like little pieces here just to kind of emphasize, and I can even add in a couple here, and then I can take this and go even darker with it and kind of give it a shadow like underneath it. So that gives me now some ideas to kind of emphasize what's going on. Now I've got a couple different elements. I've got the foreground element here, I've got her as the middle ground element, and then I can put this as a secondary element, and I can even take this and let's we can duplicate this real quick here. Oops. And what I'm going to do with this is one of them I will put in the foreground like so, and then the other one I'm going to transform to be that much smaller, and we're going to flip it horizontal here, and we can also add in some of, let me just grab some of this here. Just grabbing some of this shadow here, like this, and we'll just grab some of the rough birch in there like that. But that gives me kind of an idea now. Like, I'm starting to sense a little bit more of the environment in there, and I'm starting to sense a little bit more of what's going on. And then her being in a forest, one of the other things you might want to add in there, and I'm going to just do it on a separate layer here, is you might want to add in a little bit more of some type of rough, and I'm going to just kind of see here. We're going to go super huge on this. I'm going to just add in kind of a rough idea here, and we're going to multiply this. And what that's doing is I'm adding in some of the bright shadows, and then I'm going to just go in with an eraser. Let's go back here, and now I'm going to go with an eraser. Come on here. And just kind of add in where, and this is kind of rough, but I'm adding in where those trees are kind of adding in a little bit more, you know, like just different highlights and things like that. And I can go also in with the brush and just kind of add the darker shadows that are kind of popping up. And so that's going to give me a little bit more of a concept of what's going on. And then, of course, you want to add some color correction in there. Let's probably add some color balance, and we'll just add a little bit more blue. Kind of give it that early morning feel, like so. And let's close this. So basically, I've got now, just between what you've got and what I had before here. Alright, So basically what we've got is we went from, this where everything's flat and everything's very tonal, the same tone, to something like this where she's standing in more of a forest, and there's shadow on the ground and then there's light, and we can always add more and subtract more, and again, this is a rough paint over, but you get the idea of what's going on. All right, I hope that helps.
Hey, I wanted to thank everyone for subscribing to my Patreon, and if you haven't yet, check it out.